Welcome to today's episode in our series of podcasts, Transforming HR, the AI Revolution. Today we're addressing AI in HR. Is it HR's ally or enemy? I'm Kieran Gilmurray, your host for today, and I'm an author and expert with 30 years plus experience in automation and artificial intelligence. Today I'm joined by Clare Nutt, a chartered CIPD member and digital transformation expert in HR. Clare specializes in transforming human resource practices through technology, mindset, and modern business processes. And for those of you attending, we'll give you the perspectives in HR and AI experts, but we'll also break down the jargon so you can start to understand what you're dealing with. Our series of podcasts will take you right the way back to the basics to get a handle on terminology, advancements, and all essential prompting. Make sure you stay to the end. We've got some tips on prompt engineering to share with you that you can take away and use from today. So in this episode, as we said, we'll explore more of the impact on AI and HR, discuss its potential to augment or replace human roles, and provide insights on how HR professionals can leverage AI to enhance their productivity and strategic importance. Let's not waste any time and let's dive in. Clare, you talk about careers and career paths in one of our previous podcasts. Tell us more about how AI is impacting the traditional roles within HR departments.
Yeah, well, I think we're now into industry 4.0, or it's maybe even 5.0. I don't think anyone really knows, to be honest, because we're progressing so quickly. But we can see that digital is definitely disrupting our world. I do know that roles and responsibilities are changing, and I do feel that over the next few months and years, I'm anticipating that the key areas around the employment life cycle and the interaction that HR professionals will have with those will actually change. And we've already seen that AI is revolutionizing that recruitment through the automated candidate screening, that matching, the chatbots for those initial engagements. And AI-powered algorithms can then scan those applications and identify suitable candidates based on that predefined criteria. That inherently reduces the time and effort that's going to be required for manual screening. They can then also analyze that candidate data and predict which candidates are actually going to be likely to succeed in the role, which is huge, potentially improving the quality of that recruitment process. And I've also read about AI tools like IBM's Watson X are actually now used to enhance that candidate selection process. But interestingly, Deloitte did some research in 2023 and found that 33% of HR could actually be automated by AI, and that was over a year ago. So that will have a significant impact on the likes of recruitment and onboarding processes. When you're looking then at the employee engagement and performance management side, those AI-driven tools can analyze the employee feedback, monitor engagement levels, and predict the employee turnover in an organization. And platforms like Workday already use AI to give some real-time insights into employees' performance. But I was so shocked to read that IBM had created a predictive HR attrition program using AI, but it predicts within 95% certainty those people that are going to be flight risks to organizations, and to the point where they actually had to take some time to convince management that it was accurate, which was just phenomenal. But as a result of that, it saved IBM $300 million in retention. So I'm not surprised that they've now patented that technology, and it's a huge, significant saving for the likes of that organization. But I think AI can help us to improve the employee engagement overall. It gives that personalized feedback and possibly career development recommendations. And if we try to start imagining a world where career development and that talent planning is already automated, so the programs could identify where the skills gap are in the organization, where it's at risk, and even go as far as to recommend those that could be promoted based on their appetite to learn, their knowledge and performance. And that is already happening at some scale in other organizations. But if you then take it one step further, and that AI could then create personalized learning pathways that are aligned with the gaps in the organization, that's tailored for individual employees. It's huge. It is big change that's coming. And then if we think about even on the other side of that, in the employee life cycle, all the time we spend on employee well-being initiatives in your organization, but what if that could all be based around predictive analytics and proactive approaches? And again, we're not too far from that. McKinsey and Forbes are both indicating that AI can help us track and improve the well-being of the workforce, identifying those initial warning signs for burnout and analysing patterns in work and behaviour and communication as well. But these just aren't my thoughts. McKinsey are also predicting that around half of today's work activities could be automated in roughly a decade or so. They're saying that's earlier than predicted. I actually probably think it's going to be even sooner than that, the rate at which everything's growing. And then CIPD on the back of that are asking us as professionals to be digitally curious about all of this, and experiment with new ideas for ourselves to build that confidence in those new technologies, because it's new to everyone. No one is an expert yet, and we're all very, very far from that. It's going to take a long time of learning.
I suppose that's it, isn't it, Claire? It's like building that digital muscle. I think everybody worries you're so far behind, but everybody has to start from somewhere. But what you're describing there is either going to frighten people or excite people. Frighten in that we keep hearing these figures around, the amount of your job that could be replaced by automation.
Yeah.
Be interesting if we heard the amount of your job that could be augmented by automation. Let's see. So let's explore this a little bit more. So I suppose the question that now begs asking is, does generative AI create potential or risks for HR? Like, how is it affecting the important work that HR professionals actually do?
I think on the potential side, it's helping us to generate creative content, because that's what it is. It's about creating those new documents or those new emails. It's a new spin on the message maybe you're trying to get across about organizational objectives, or using words that we've never thought of, or applying the empathy and emotional injection into our communications that maybe employees want to hear. It's creating new and exciting job descriptions that take less than half the time probably to output, or even the likes of new learning materials and personalized employee communications and experiences. Again, I still see it as a research assistant, that productivity partner that works alongside HR. And tools like ChatGPT-4 can be used to draft emails, develop reports, and give us more in-depth analytics, which all enhances that HR productivity. But we are still at the very early stages in HR, and most HR teams are still exploring that potential of AI-powered solutions. I do think some are still afraid to delve into it. I think when it first was released, we kind of dipped our toe in the water maybe. But then things like ethical decision-making, the EU AI Act, organizational risk and bias were all thrown into the mix there. And some people really did take a wide step back for fear of what was coming down the line. And the difficult position that we now find ourselves in is that it's evolving at an unprecedented rate. And Kieran, I can remember one of your sessions where I was first introduced to your content and your expertise. I can remember seeing a slide you shared during a session where you were delivering about the evolutionary curve of AI and what that looked like as well.
Yeah, that's the scary bit, isn't it, Claire? And I get why people are slightly hesitant or worried about the speed of this. Because what if I remember the slide back, it was sort of an almost linear curve or flat line where everything was moving because of tech. And then because things have got cheaper, quicker, better, faster, all of a sudden from the AI age, it's gone like a vertical hockey stick. And that's the bit that's going to keep happening, because as someone said a while ago, it's never been faster and it's never going to be slower, and AI is never going to be as bad as it currently is. And that's the bit, that we really do need to be cautious about, because how do you run to keep up? And I mean quite literally run to keep up. You've mentioned, the technology, and we're hearing all of the different phrases all of the time. But now the legislation is starting to catch up. So now if I'm a HR professional or IT professional, I'm wondering, do I wait? Do I jump? Where should I invest my precious time and precious dollars? Because tomorrow it could have all changed. My advice is similar to your own. You look for the more commercial packages that probably will be there. There's no certainty in life. So you go through a sequence of ticks. Is it a startup that's not funded? Probably not the best idea. Is it something huge like a Microsoft, an OpenAI, a Google? Well, things are probably going to be moving in that direction. And therefore just start to take time to learn. And later on, as you're demonstrating to people how to prompt, and we mentioned some of the technologies, starting to read about them, practice with them, starting to, as you said, create job descriptions, help you write better, quicker, faster. Even starting with those simple processes can make a difference, because there's a phrase doing the rounds at the moment that says those who know AI will surely replace the jobs of those who don't. And that I firmly believe in. A let's see what others are doing approach just isn't going to work. With everybody else moving forward, you have a choice of, getting on board or losing your competitive advantage. It isn't an either or at this moment in time, But there are risks. I think that's fair to say as well.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And on the flip side of that, like you say, there are the risks of using that generative AI. I think one of the main risks that I see for HR is this risk of everyone becoming an expert, because we've mentioned before that generative AI is access to that all-important knowledge and intelligence that we have craved. But if your line managers or your employees even are asking for professional HR practitioner advice from a generative AI program without that procedural practitioner HR expertise or organizational context that the human in HR gives, and they take action on that advice, it leaves organizations wide open to litigation. And we know that all too well, that generative AI can still produce inaccurate or biased content known as those solutions. And I know you've actually experienced that as well, Kieran, when you ChatGPT'd yourself. I mean, how far is that from the truth?
It wasn't too far wrong. I wrote, "Who is Kieran Gilmurray?" I must have forgotten. And it said single author. Now, I don't know, I'm a double author. And I think it was a bit of fun when I was doing that. But there is a real consequence to that. If I take the legal perspective, there was the famous story of last year when two lawyers representing an airline in the US went to court. They presented legal precedent, 6 legal cases that were in support of their argument. The judge questioned the legal cases because there was something about them that didn't quite look true. Lo and behold, both lawyers had actually used ChatGPT to generate responses. It tried to give them an answer, because back in the day when you'd a chatbot, it very often didn't know the answer. And even when you were very prescriptive about the question, the computer still said no, we hated it. Now the large language models and generative AI have been designed not to give you that experience, but there's a consequence to that. So if I'm giving you an answer, it may not be real. That's what an hallucination is. It's something that looks plausible but isn't. In the instance of that court case, it was 6 plausible sounding legal precedents. The judge, of course, threw it out, fined the 2 lawyers. The 2 lawyers were sacked. The airline is now suing, of course, the law firm as well for misrepresentation. Now, that's the serious consequence. And you do have to worry. And if we are giving answers out, that look plausible and people make decisions upon them, then we have to hold ourselves legally liable. There are comedy elements as well. There is the case now of a chatbot. Actually, someone wrote and says, "What did you think of your holiday?" Because it was doing a follow-up. And they went, "It was a great holiday. I just didn't like the location of the hotel." To which the chatbot wrote back, "Don't worry about that. I'll move the hotel." Not I'll move you, I'll physically move the hotel. But in all seriousness, there are risks to it. Hallucinations is one. And then there's the legal ramifications, data protection ramifications, and everything else. That shouldn't put you off, Claire. That basically goes back to good education and good quality data in the system. Because if you have high quality data and then continuous human monitoring, then you can mitigate these mistakes. But you do have to be careful. And I think you've been reading a little bit around this as well.
Yeah, and that, like you said, that high quality data is important. And obviously bias has been a hot topic around this too. But I was reading a recent people management article, and they made a very valid point. We are attempting to hold AI to account for being 100% non-bias, but yet no human in the world is non-biased. And it kind of begs the question, is that an unrealistic expectation of a programming language? How do we hold it to account? I mean, is it about getting that as low as possible, do you think?
Yeah, I think you said it, we're all biased. And it doesn't mean we're consciously biased, or at least I hope not. We're unconsciously biased because we're learning all the time. So to that degree, bias is unavoidable. We learn every day. Computer programs in themselves aren't biased because they're actually, it's the humans behind the computer programs. Bias is being recorded in the actual algorithms of the code. So for example, if you go back in the day from a HR perspective, then again, their words, not mine. When software engineers were looking for the next best software engineers, they looked around a room. Guess what? White, male, pale, steel. They codified that, not knowing any different. They weren't conscious of their own bias. Of course, then when they went for more software engineers, minorities, females, and everyone else actually got struck out, for want of a better phrase, because the computer did say no. So I do think bias is unavoidable. And that's just when we're trained by, for example, predominantly male developers or researchers, or anyone who has a particular conscious or unconscious bias, that will be inherited in the code. As you say, the key is to keep it as low as possible. If we can train models really well, use diverse developers, researchers, ideas, you can actually get bias checkers built in. You can hire organizations to identify bias. Then we'll get to the point where the AI is identifying the bias more keenly in our products than anything else. So hopefully, to goodness, by being conscious of it or more conscious of it, we can create more inclusive job descriptions, training, and get content better by removing any biased language. The interesting bit is then it comes to, well, if we can codify all that in the machine, can the machine actually get more accurate than a person? Therefore, we retain our human biases, but the machine is so conscious of it that we may replace our checking. So look, we move on a little bit. We looked at potential and the risk of HR. What about some of so we don't frighten people, Claire, what about some of the examples of how AI can augment or potentially replace some HR functions?
Yeah, augment, definitely. It's starting to give us that in-depth data-driven, evidence-based practice that's critical and key for decision-making for CIPD and HR professionals. And we can use it when we're analysing large data sets and give that real in-depth analytics, which opens the door to identify maybe patterns, behaviours, or trends in our human capital that our human analytics haven't really been able to determine yet. And even using good software programs for those analytics maybe still haven't identified underlying issues. But take those predictive analytics that I've mentioned before, and that then applies to your problem solving skills and takes it to a new height. So if you're addressing issues before they've even arisen in an organization, it's given HR that agile and productive and proactive approach, and ultimately a more positive and satisfied workforce, which is, one of our goals. But we can start to use the likes of robotic and automated processes to streamline and digitize some of those repetitive administrative tasks. And those are tasks that HR should not be doing anymore. And while they're still required and they still add value to what we do, the automation allows us to focus on more strategic initiatives. And for example, AI could analyze employee surveys to identify your engagement trends, suggest interventions. You could even fully automate your interview booking process in your recruitment platforms. AI could identify the best candidates based on data analysis, reducing your time to hire. And those chatbots and automated flows can really start to streamline some of those processes around onboarding, or giving even new hires that instant access to resources and information. So we are recruiting in some very, very turbulent markets. So speed and first impressions are everything to applicants at the minute. I think replacing HR functions is a little bit more of a sensitive subject. No HR practitioner wants to hear that they could potentially be replaced by AI, but I do think the type of work and the HR role they will undertake will change. I think this immediate future will start to automate a lot of the low-level repetitive administration in the role, and that role will inherently change. And then we'll start to move into a totally different role. And that's where organizations need to invest and upskill their workforce to navigate those changes and implement those new technological solutions. But I think our listeners will be relieved to hear that I do feel that human touch remains crucial for tasks that require empathy or even complex decision making. Things like that final decision on whether to shortlist or not. Yeah, get the AI to streamline the process for you, but you make the ultimate decision. When you're looking at the outcomes of preliminary investigations, for example, or which L&D strategy to implement that aligns with the future of your workforce, while AI is a useful tool in that human oversight is essential for maintaining those ethical standards and making sure you get fair treatment in those decisions that are being made.
Yeah, I think I would sit on that one as well, Claire. The augmentation and the putting human in the loop, as it's described, the key moments. The oddity is, and I get why people are worried, because automation can do a lot. As you said earlier on, McKinsey survey said up to 30% of your role can change. Great. if someone can take away the mundane 30% of my role, I'll bite their hand off tomorrow morning to allow me to do a lot more things. So we're in agreement that AI can augment when used properly. Maybe the replacement is a future discussion and really depends on people themselves really running toward the technology and embracing it. But how does the quality of our prompts and the data that we put into the systems affects AI performance in HR tasks?
Profusely. We need to have effective prompting and that prompt engineering that we're talking about. And that isn't necessarily a skill HR currently have. I think we're all still trying to master that. And that's what we need to really invest in and then practice as well. So those high quality prompts and the accurate data inputs are critical for obtaining that relevant and accurate AI output. So remember, generative AI creates new content by learning patterns from existing data. So we all need to be able to craft those clear, specific, and content-rich prompts to ensure that we do have its best performance and use data that's not sensitive as well.
Well, if folks stay on today until the end, we'll take you through some specific prompt engineering tips on how to get the best from generative AI. And then hopefully, to goodness, avoid some hallucinations and whatever else in the process, because there's some nonsensical rubbish produced. And that does, as you say, look, it goes back to the quality of the data you put in. But that's always been the case. That way, manage the data. You'll not mislead HR or the people inside of the business itself, which is absolutely key.
Yeah.
Alrighty. So you mentioned the continuous human oversight. We've talked about human in the loop. Do you think HR role as gatekeepers will change with the rise of AI? And do you think that'll be an attractive proposition, Claire, minding the robot?
Oh, I think, yes, HR professionals may transition. No, I think they actually will transition from those real traditional gatekeeping roles into more strategic partners. So focusing on guiding and overseeing those AI systems and ensuring it's ethical use and compliance in organizations. Whether everyone welcomes that or not, I'm not sure. I think with the increased integration of AI into those everyday HR functions, there is greater reliance on data-driven decision-making, and the evolution of HR moves roles more towards that strategic and analytic position as well. So the likes of CIPD are recommending that people professionals need to act as those critical friends as well as a main stakeholder in any of those strategies that are implementing AI. There is still obviously some debate as to who's responsible for the actions resulting from the use of AI, but that's still something that in the UK, the government needs to provide some sort of framework for to organisations. But I think in the meantime, HR professionals should upskill in areas like data analytics, AI literacy, and that kind of strategic thinking role. Engaging with the likes of AI tools and platforms helps in understanding their capabilities and limitations. So I think it's critical that HR start to have a seat at that table when discussing what technologies to invest in and implement in a business. And you might actually be surprised at the pool of AI talent you already have available in organizations, because it no longer takes a degree in computer science or a software engineer to operate something like this. I mean, my background was originally nursing before I moved into HR, and I can build low-code applications with AI's assistance, but it does require developing those skills and knowledge and the understanding about how that's going to work. But funny, very interesting read actually that I had. I was doing a little bit of research, and I'll be honest, ChatGPT didn't help me very much with this, because when I was asking for some research and we're talking about effective prompting and outputs, checking the data is obviously key as well. I'd asked it to give me some of those academic references and access to them. 90% of them were incorrect as well. But something I did come across was a really interesting report for Cognizance, and it's the Centre for the Future of Work. But back in 2020, they wrote a report about the 21 jobs of the future, and over 50% of those needed high to mid tech skills. And I think one of the roles was actually called a human machine team manager, I think it was. And that was to basically balance the art of the job, or what was the right thing to do, against the science of the job from the machine suggestion as well. So I found that really, really interesting read as well.
I really like that because I have a thing in my head and I keep doing this in talks that talks about human and digital labor work together. So at the moment we predominantly mind people, but in the future we will be minding, conversational agents, digital workers and everything else. So I'm not surprised. But what we're describing here is really interesting in my head. When you're talking about the change your role from admin to strategic to digital skills and whatever else, I'm kind of liking it. But what do you think the future holds for AI and HR then, if you summarize it?
It's really difficult to say because it is so turbulent at the minute. So I read a report from Deloitte actually on this topic, and I thought it's excellent in trying to summarize what will happen even in the next 12 months. And it is quite thought-provoking. So they've come up with 5 evidence-backed predictions basically on what the evolution and the innovations are going to be within HR in 2024 and what you can begin preparing for now into the future. So what they're saying is that generative AI will be even further integrated into those existing HR technology solutions. So you'll not necessarily have new solutions. There'll be generative AI and you'll be encountering that across a number of existing platforms that you have, like emails. We've seen the release across Microsoft, those team communication tools, everything. Headless HR systems is another. Now, that doesn't mean no humans in HR, but it basically means HR process platforms or those point solutions that will operate without having that traditional user interface or the front end. So that back end functionality of the HR system is basically separated, and that gives flexibility and customization across an organization and how it's going to be used. There is obviously wide use of the likes of APIs, and that using that integration as well means you can have multi-platform or multi-application as well. Total workforce intelligence was another area, and I find this really interesting. So they are suggesting that we'll be using technology to analyze both internal and external information around candidates. So that's searching the market for job advertisements, CVs, talent profiles, census data, all of the information that's available to gain insights into skilled and talent availability. So they see that leveraging that data then gives us more information to make the decisions about our workforce and enhancing the productivity and agility of what we already have. Deskless worker solutions, they talked as well around enhancing the experience of those workers who are frontline and basically enhancing the experience that they have in a digital world so that they do have readily available access to empower them in their role and enhance their work experience. And then the final trend they talked about was digital identity management, so that we will now see it becoming used in new hire requirements. And that's something that we started to see adopted throughout the pandemic with the UK government using that Gateway app and verification online of your identification. So I do agree to a sense that there's no reason why that can't be used within the hiring process. It's about how much access that those suggestions maybe have to personal information that's out there and that organizations will see before you're actually employed necessarily by an organization. It's a bit up in the air, but as everything, they're predictions and things are moving so turbulently at the minute, it's very hard to put a pin in it.
Yeah, that way there you can make lots of predictions and then have reasons why they may or may not turn out. But again, it shows you, and this was the one thing for COVID for me, if you wanted to make it happen, it could happen. So all the excuses of the day, can't have single digital identities and all flooded away. And I like the idea of using internal and external data. The key bit goes back to risk and compliance and responsible AI, because let's be honest, back in the day, if you and I had filled in some of the stuff we were doing on Facebook and there was photographic images of it, we probably wouldn't want our employers or potential employers seeing it now. That said, maybe they do.
Yeah.
And you and I get hired for a whole lot more things, a whole lot more industries than we currently do. Claire, we promised the audience that we'd give them a little bit of prompt engineering advice. So what advice will we give the audience today?
Well, I'm going to share my screen, and if I just select entire screen, I have a sample of some prompt engineering. Now, I cannot take credit or full credit for this. Hopefully you can see my screen, okay?
Let me see. Let me just pop you, not me, in place here. And there you go. So hopefully everybody can see that.
Great. So this, I was introduced to another expert in AI called Go, and she was inspiring, I have to say, when I was listening to her go through the basics of AI way back about 18 months ago when I first started to explore this as a topic. And she shared a great structure for prompting ChatGPT. And this is generally what I would use when I'm giving ChatGPT instructions, or Gemini, or any other products that you're using. So it's settled into what's known as a scribe. So you're specifying the role, and you're being specific across all of these areas, specifying the role that you want ChatGPT to act as, giving it context to your example, delegating it the responsibility, and then giving it direct instructions about what you want it to do. Banter's in there to kind of get a little bit of feedback and questioning, so things you haven't thought about to get AI to ask you, and then evaluation in any of your examples. So this on the right hand side, you can screenshot this, even gives you an example of how your prompts would be structured for AI. If I just scroll across, this is a direct example of potentially what you could put into ChatGPT then. So I wanted to draft a compelling HR digital transformation strategy. So my prompt would be: act as a human resources strategic business partner working within the food manufacturing industry in Northern Ireland. That's your specific role. You will create a compelling HR digital transformation strategy. That's the context of your example. Your responsibility is, and you're detailing the responsibility here. So draft this in such a way that it sets out a strong and persuasive strategy to deliver successful outcomes in our organization. It is essential that this is linked to our wider organizational strategic plan, aligned with our people strategy. This must be suitable for an audience of senior leaders in the organization, but also understood by our wider stakeholders. You should also include references to academic research that supports your suggestions, and give me details of these sources. So that's your responsibility. And then you'll add on the additional prompts. So please reiterate your understanding of this prompt before generating the detail and content. An initial general outline would suffice. Ask me any questions about any additional requirements or details you may need in order to generate the information. And once complete, ask me to evaluate the drafted strategy. And then at the end, I've also added this in. I find this quite interesting, but I would also ask you to review what you have written the second time and make further suggestions. So you're not taking the first response, you're continually challenged, because remember, it's a learning model. So it may take a different pattern in its approach or response to you. And it just kind of highlights how you can use that for a prompt. In that particular example, really, and to test how well structured your prompt's going to be, it should be coming back and asking you about things like your organization, your organizational strategic plan, and then your people strategy as well. So this is why it's important to have that content rich and give it as much information before we're asking for a response back then. Anything you would add to that or suggest, actually, Kieran?
Yeah, there's probably a couple of, like, I love the act as, because you need to give it context. And if we step back from it all, like, I sometimes describe ChatGPT, Gemini, Bing, Bard. They're all the same thing, by the way. Each of them gives slightly different answers. I know we're using an example of ChatGPT because it's well known, but you might want to try different variations because each of them have strengths and weaknesses as well. So worth trying. What I would say is, look, step back from the AI, because the thing when you type that prompt in, you're going to be dramatically surprised in two directions. One is, oh my God, it can do that. My job's under threat and I've got a problem. And the second one is, as you say, Claire, sometimes it just throws up a rubbish answer and you go,
random things. Yeah. Watch out for references.
But that's where I go back to stepping away from the tech and say, look, imagine like you've got new people in HR, absolutely massively keen, come with knowledge, but not the complete knowledge. You wouldn't just say, look, go off there and write a strategy. You know, if you did, you probably wouldn't get the best answer and you've set them up to fail. And it's the same thing with a prompt engine, which is the more information you can feed it, the more direction you can possibly give it, the more likely it is to come up with a really great answer. And therefore, you can attach documents to that particular prompt. Read this. You can attach success stories, data analytics, you name it. If you feed the machine really great quality input, you can get great quality output. And I love what's done at the end there, which is just validate this to me. Show me how you got your answers. Explain to me your reasoning. And that way there you can cross-check and validate. And I think that's been one of the key themes today. If we look and summarize toward the end, because we have to come to the end of this talk, although we're enjoying it so much. This isn't about, replacing great individuals with great technology. This is about using the individual in the right context, the strategic, the tactical, the forward thinking, using all of those human skills. And this is about bringing and giving them great technology like large language models, generative AI models, chat GPT, models and applications infused with all this decreasingly expensive tech, but increasingly powerful tech, to augment them to do really amazing things right from the get-go, which is go out and find the right individuals who best suit your culture, who are going to be the most performant, who are going to stay the longest, who will actually enhance the culture of the organization and allow you to deliver very successful business. But like everything in life, there is perfect ingredients to create the perfect cake. But the odd time you want to mix that up with a little bit of something different, so you end up with something delicious that you never expected. As Ophelia Garcia, the Spanish linguist, said, believe it or not, back in about 1980 or 90, if all the flowers in the garden are exactly the same, it's a very boring garden. Unless, of course, it's tulips, then that's all right. But you do want to put great technology with great people. And again, just check and challenge yourself what it is you're creating, because ultimately, a computer is only as good as the information that's in it. Some of it's biased, some of it can be pretty much same. Therefore, judge and question as ever. Claire, thank you so much indeed for a
Thank you,
wonderful
Kieran.
podcast. We have more podcasts coming, folks. Please stay tuned. We have more insights to deliver. And if you've got any questions or any queries, please do so in the social media comments, and we'll get answering those in our next webinar and podcasts to come. Have a wonderful day.